She stormed into my backyard screaming about smoke, noise, and HOA violations, then called the police on my family barbecue. What she didn't know was that the man she was trying to impress at home worked under me, and by the time the sirens faded, her complaint turned into the most awkward phone call of her life. The smell of hickory smoke drifted lazily over my backyard, curling into the late afternoon sky like a promise of a good evening. Burgers sizzled on the grill, kids laughed near the picnic table, and someone had brought a cheap speaker that was doing its best to play classic rock without cutting out. It wasn't a party, just a simple family barbecue. The kind of thing neighbors usually ignored or, at worst, tolerated with a polite eye roll. That's when she appeared. I first noticed her shadow stretching across the grass before I heard her voice. Sharp, loud. The kind that didn't ask questions because it already believed it had all the answers. "Do you think this is appropriate?" she snapped. I turned from the grill and saw her standing just inside my open gate, arms crossed, lips pursed so tightly they looked painful. Mid-40s, perfectly styled blonde hair, designer sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She wore a fitted blouse and slacks, completely out of place among folding chairs and paper plate. "Afternoon," I said calmly. "Can I help you?" She gestured dramatically toward the grill. "The smoke is blowing directly into my yard. There are noise violations, unauthorized guests, and I don't see any HOA approval posted." There it was. Oh, like a spell she expected to work instantly. "We're just having a barbecue," I replied. "It's well within city hours, and the HOA rules allow." "I know the rules," she cut in, stepping closer. "And you are in violation. I've already documented this." She lifted her phone, clearly recording, her mouth curling into a thin, satisfied smile. My cousin Mark paused mid-laugh at the table, sensing the tension. My wife glanced over from the cooler, eyebrows raised. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "this is private property. If you have a concern, you can file it through the HOA office." Her eyes flashed. "Don't patronize me. I'm trying to be reasonable." The way she said reasonable made it sound like a threat. "I'm going to call the police," she announced, already tapping on her phone. "We'll see how reasonable you are then." There was a moment, a quiet one, where the backyard seemed to hold its breath. The grill popped softly. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower hummed. "Go ahead," I said. That seemed to catch her off guard. She hesitated, just for a second, then straightened her posture as if daring me to regret it. "Fine." She turned sharply and marched back toward her house, phone pressed to her ear, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I need officers dispatched immediately. There's an aggressive man hosting an illegal gathering. Smoke, noise, possible code violations." My wife walked over to me, lowering her voice. "You okay?" "Perfectly," I said, flipping a burger. "Let it play out." Mark leaned in. "You sure this won't turn into a whole thing?" I almost smiled. "Oh, it's definitely going to be a thing." 10 minutes later, red and blue lights washed over the quiet suburban street. The chatter in the yard faded as 2 patrol cars pulled up. The officers stepped out, professional and alert, hands resting casually near their belt. She reappeared instantly, as if summoned by the sirens. "Officers!" she cried, rushing toward them. "Thank goodness you're here." She launched into her story with theatrical precision: harassment, smoke inhalation, intimidation. She pointed at me like I was a criminal mastermind instead of a guy in an apron holding a spatula. One of the officers nodded politely and then turned to me. "Sir, can you tell us what's going on?" "Of course," I said. "We're having a family barbecue. No noise violations, no threats, no HOA restrictions broken." The officer glanced around. "Kid. Food. Normalcy. May I see your ID?" he asked. I handed it over without hesitation. He looked down at it. Then he blinked. His expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. He looked at his partner. Then back at me. "Yes, sir," he said carefully. "One moment." They stepped aside, murmuring quietly. The woman watched them, arms folded, smug confidence radiating off her like heat. She had no idea. And in just a few minutes, she was about to learn that calling the police doesn't always go the way you think, especially when you don't know who's standing on the other side of the grill. The backyard had been perfect before she arrived. The grill was going strong, smoke drifting lazily into the warm afternoon air. My cousins were laughing near the picnic table, my kids were chasing each other with water guns, and my wife was inside refilling trays like she always did when she wanted everything just right. It was one of those rare Saturdays where work, stress, and responsibilities stayed far away. Then the shouting started. At first, I thought it was a neighbor arguing with their spouse. HOA neighborhoods have a way of turning every raised voice into background noise. But then the shouting got closer, louder, sharper, and unmistakably directed at us. "Excuse me. Excuse me." I turned around to see her standing at the edge of my fence. Mid-40s, perfectly styled hair, oversized sunglasses, phone already in hand. She didn't ask permission to speak, she demanded attention. "You can't have an open flame back here," she snapped. "The smoke is blowing into my yard. This is a violation." I blinked. "Hi," I said calmly. "We're just having a barbecue." She scoffed. "I don't care what you call it. I'm part of the HOA board, and this is unacceptable." That was the moment I recognized her. She lived 3 houses down, the one with the pristine lawn, the spotless SUV, and the constant complaints about everyone else. I also knew something else about her, something she definitely didn't know about me. But I didn't say it. Not yet. I stepped closer to the fence, keeping my voice even. "We're within city code. No quiet hours, no fire bans. We're fine." Her lips tightened. "You don't get to decide that." Before I could respond, she raised her phone dramatically. "I'm calling the police." My cousin muttered, "Is she serious?" She was very serious. She turned her back to us and started pacing, loudly narrating the call like it was a performance. "Yes, hello? There's an illegal gathering. Smoke, noise, possible safety hazard. I feel threatened." Threatened. I looked around at the scene. Kids laughing, burgers flipping, paper plates stacked neatly. If this was threatening, the word had lost all meaning. My wife came outside then, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's going on?" "Neighbor called the cops on the barbecue," I said quietly. She sighed. "Of course she did." The woman finished her call and shot us a smug look. "They're on their way. Let's see how confident you are when uniforms show up." She folded her arms and waited like she'd just won something. 10 minutes later, the sound of sirens cut through the air. 2 patrol cars pulled up out front, lights flashing but subdued. The chatter in the backyard died instantly. Kids went quiet. Adults straightened up. The officers approached calmly. One of them, a younger guy, nodded politely. "Afternoon. We received a noise and safety complaint." Before I could speak, she rushed forward. "Thank God you're here. They're violating HOA regulations, filling the air with smoke, disturbing the peace." The older officer raised a hand. "Ma'am, we'll speak to everyone." She huffed but stepped back, clearly annoyed she wasn't immediately validated. I explained the situation calmly. No alcohol issues, no excessive noise, grill placed safely away from structures. The officer nodded along, scanning the yard. "Everything looks fine," he said. "You're well within city limits." Her face hardened. "But I told you, I'm HOA." The officer glanced at her. "HOA rules aren't criminal law, ma'am." She opened her mouth, then closed it. That wasn't the response she'd expected. Then she tried again. "Well, my husband works for the federal government. He knows how these things work." That got my attention. The younger officer raised an eyebrow. "Oh. Yes," she said proudly. "He's with the FBI." I saw my wife glance at me. She knew what was coming. The older officer turned back to me. "Sir, can I get your name?" I gave it. He repeated it slowly. Then he froze. He looked at me again, really looked this time, then reached for his radio. He stepped a few feet away, spoke quietly, listened, then came back with a very different expression. "Sir," he said carefully, "do you work with the Bureau?" "I do," I replied. "Supervisory Special Agent." Silence fell like a dropped plate. Her confidence evaporated in real time. The color drained from her face. She turned slowly toward me, eyes wide behind her sunglasses. "What?" she whispered. The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, your husband reports to him." You could hear a pin drop. She stared at me, mouth opening and closing, searching for words that wouldn't come. The power she thought she had, HOA titles, empty threats, borrowed authority, collapsed in seconds. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, "Maybe next time, knock instead of calling the police." The officers exchanged a glance, nodded, and left. She didn't say another word. She turned and walked back to her house, shoulders hunched, phone trembling in her hand. The grill sizzled again. Laughter slowly returned. But down the street, I knew a very uncomfortable conversation was about to happen. The next morning was quieter than usual. No lawn mowers. No dog walkers lingering longer than necessary. No neighbors waving as they passed by. HOA neighborhoods thrive on gossip, and after the police cars left the night before, I knew the story had already begun mutating with every retelling. I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee, watching the street like it was a crime scene. 3 houses down, her curtains twitched, then snapped shut. She was home. Very home. My wife leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You think she slept?" I took a sip. Not a chance. By noon, the HOA email hit everyone's inbox. Subject: Community Safety Reminder. It was vague, passive-aggressive, and clearly written in a rush. Something about misunderstandings, proper communication, and avoiding unnecessary escalation. No names mentioned. No apology either. But the subtext was obvious. She'd been burned, and she was trying to control the narrative. That lasted exactly 4 hours. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Agent, sorry, Supervisor," a nervous male voice said. "This is Tom." I recognized the voice instantly. Her husband. We'd spoken plenty of times before. Professional, polite, reliable. Not once had he ever mentioned where he lived or who his wife was. Now I understood why. "You got a minute?" he asked. "I do," I said. There was a long pause. I wanted to apologize. Personally. I let the silence breathe. For my wife's behavior. Last night. And, well, in general. I leaned back against the counter. "Tom, I didn't connect the dots until she did." "She didn't tell me she was calling the police," he said quickly. "I found out when my phone started lighting up this morning." Internal chatter travels fast. I imagine it does. He exhaled hard. "She's humiliated. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. She's been asked to step down." That surprised me. I'd expected discomfort, not consequences. "They didn't like the attention," he continued. "Or the fact that she invoked federal authority like a weapon." I closed my eyes briefly. HOA politics were ruthless when embarrassment entered the picture. "I'm not asking you to do anything," Tom said carefully. "I just needed you to know I'm handling it." "I appreciate that," I replied. And I meant it. We hung up on professional terms, but the damage was already done. That evening, a different neighbor knocked on my door. Then another. And another. They didn't come all at once, just spaced out enough to feel organic. Each one brought the same story in slightly different packaging. "She's been like this for years. She fined us for chalk drawings. She tried to tow my son's car for being 2 inches over the line. She told my wife she'd ruin us if we didn't repaint the fence." I listened. I nodded. I said very little. Power doesn't create behavior. It reveals it. By Friday, the HOA board officially announced her resignation, due to personal reasons. The email included a reminder about respecting neighbors and avoiding misuse of emergency services. That line hadn't been there before. She didn't leave the house for 2 days. When she finally did, it was early morning. I saw her while taking out the trash. Sunglasses on. Hoodie up. No phone in sight. She froze when she noticed me. For a second I wondered if she'd say something. Apologize, accuse, lash out. Instead, she lowered her head and walked faster. That should have been the end of it. But entitlement doesn't disappear overnight. It just goes underground. The following week, I got a call from City Code Enforcement. Anonymous complaint. Excessive smoke. Same story, different uniform. The inspector showed up, took one look around, and shook his head. You're good. Someone's got too much time. I smiled politely. Inside, I was done. I documented everything. Date, times, calls, emails, witnesses, patterns. Not to threaten. Not to retaliate. To protect. Because people like her don't stop when they're embarrassed. They stop when accountability becomes unavoidable. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived. It wasn't from me. It was from her husband's department. Mandatory ethics review. Conflict of interest disclosure. Counseling referral. Turns out invoking federal authority, even indirectly, sets off alarms much higher up the chain than she realized. That night, the street was silent again. But this time, it felt different. Not tense. Final. And somewhere behind those closed curtains, she finally understood what real power looks like, and how quietly it moves when it's done tolerating noise. If Chapter 3 was about consequences, Chapter 4 was about exposure. Once her resignation became public, something shifted in the neighborhood. The fear went first. People stopped whispering and started talking, openly, confidently, like a dam had cracked. The HOA Facebook group, once a sterile wasteland of trash pickup reminders and lost pet posts, exploded overnight. Someone shared the resignation email. Someone else commented, "About time." Then another added, "Anyone else have stories?" They did. Screenshots appeared. Old warning notices. Fines issued for grass half an inch too long. Photos of violation stickers slapped onto cars in the dead of night. A mother posted about being threatened with legal action because her kids left bikes on the driveway. A veteran shared how she'd accused him of intimidation for wearing his service jacket during a meeting. The board tried to shut it down, but it was too late. The narrative had escaped. Meanwhile, I stayed out of it. No comments. No posts. No quiet encouragement. I didn't need to steer the conversation. The truth was doing just fine on its own. That restraint paid off 3 days later when a plainclothes officer knocked on my door. He introduced himself as Internal Affairs. "Mind if we talk?" he asked. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where my wife and I had laughed just days earlier, still amazed at how fast things had turned. He didn't accuse. He didn't interrogate. He asked questions. Measured, precise, practiced. Did she reference federal authority during the incident? Did she claim influence over law enforcement? Did she imply retaliation was possible? I answered honestly. Yes. Yes. And yes. He nodded, jotting notes. That aligns with what we've been hearing. From the HOA? I asked. From multiple sources, he replied. Including her. That caught my attention. She's cooperating? I said. He gave a thin smile. People cooperate when they realize denial won't work. After he left, I sat alone for a long time. Not triumphant. Not satisfied. Just aware. This was no longer about a backyard barbecue or an entitled complaint. It had crossed into a space where careers bend or break. The next development came through Tom. He called that evening, his voice heavier than before. "She's been placed on mandatory leave," he said quietly. "From everything." I didn't respond right away. "She's blaming everyone," he continued. "The HOA. The police. You. Me." "I figured," I said. "But," he added, she also finally admitted something. What's that? That she's been doing this for years. Using titles, threats, fear. She said it made her feel important. That word lingered after we hung up. Important. Some people confuse authority with worth. Take one away and the other collapses with it. By the end of the week, the HOA board dissolved and reformed under interim leadership. Emergency bylaws were passed. Fines were frozen. Appeals reopened. People who'd been quietly paying penalties for years suddenly got refunds. The neighborhood felt lighter. But she grew darker. One afternoon, as I was leaving for work, I noticed her standing at the end of her driveway, staring at my house. No sunglasses this time. No hoodie. Just raw, exposed anger. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But when she raised her phone and started recording, I stopped. Don't, I said calmly. She froze. You don't want another report on misuse, I added. Trust me. Her hand shook as she lowered the phone. For the first time I saw it clearly, not rage, not entitlement. Fear. Real fear. A week later, a moving truck pulled up in front of her house. No announcement. No goodbye emails. No dramatic exit post. Just boxes. Silence. And the slow erasure of someone who'd once believed the entire street revolved around her authority. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, then stepped outside as the truck drove away. Conversations sparked. Laughter followed. That night, my wife and I sat in the backyard again. Same grill. Same table. Same quiet hum of normal life. You think it's really over? She asked. For us, I said. Yes. And for her. I looked out at the darkened street. No, I replied. But that part isn't our responsibility. Because the truth is, consequences don't always come loudly. Sometimes they arrive like this, methodical, documented, undeniable. And once they start, they don't need you anymore. They finish the job themselves. By the time spring settled in, the neighborhood barely resembled the place it had been just a few months earlier. Not because the houses changed, but because the tone did. Where there had once been tension, there was ease. Where people used to glance over their shoulders before speaking, they now lingered on sidewalks, laughing longer than necessary, as if reclaiming something that had been quietly stolen from them over the years. The new HOA board held its first open meeting in the community center. No closed doors. No intimidation. No raised voices. I attended, not as a participant, but as an observer. People spoke freely. A retired couple talked about fines that had nearly forced them to sell. A single mother described how scared she'd been when violation notices showed up weekly, threatening liens she didn't understand. A young man admitted he'd avoided walking his dog at night because he didn't want another incident. Each story landed with weight, and each one made the same thing clear. This had never been about rules. It had been about power. When the meeting ended, the interim president approached me. Middle-aged, nervous, honest. We owe you an apology, he said. You don't owe me anything, I replied. He shook his head. We ignored warning signs. We let one person control the entire culture. That happens, I said. What matters is what you do after. He nodded, visibly relieved. Outside, my wife squeezed my hand. Feels strange, she said. Seeing people breathe again. It does, I agreed. At home, life returned to normal. Real normal, not the fragile kind. Weekend barbecues. Kids riding bikes without being chased off. Music played at reasonable volumes without someone threatening consequences. And not once did a police car roll down the street because someone felt offended. Tom called less often after that. When he did, his voice sounded steadier. She's officially out, he told me one evening. No appeal left. I didn't celebrate. I'm sorry, I said instead. He exhaled. I know. But honestly, this needed to happen. I just wish it hadn't taken all this. Accountability rarely arrives gently, I replied. There was a pause. I resigned too, he added. That surprised me. From the bureau? I asked. No, he said. From pretending I didn't see the signs at home. I respected that answer more than he knew. Weeks passed. Then months. The story faded into neighborhood lore, told occasionally to new residents who couldn't quite believe it. The kind of story that always ends with, "You should have seen her face." But for me, the lesson stuck quieter and deeper. Authority doesn't announce itself with shouting. Real power doesn't need threats. And respect can't be demanded, it's either earned or exposed as fake. One Saturday afternoon, I fired up the grill again. Same backyard. Same smell of charcoal. Same easy laughter drifting into the evening air. A neighbor raised a drink. "To peace and quiet," he joked. I smiled. "To boundaries," I corrected. Everyone laughed, but they understood. Later that night, after the guests left and the yard grew still, my wife leaned against me. "Would you do anything differently?" she asked. I thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I didn't escalate. I didn't retaliate. I just didn't bend." She nodded. "Sometimes that's all it takes." As the lights dimmed and the street settled into calm, I realized something important. This wasn't a story about an HOA Karen. It was a story about what happens when intimidation meets quiet certainty. About how titles crumble when exposed to daylight. And about how the people who rely on fear are always the least prepared to face consequences. Because when authority is borrowed, it disappears the moment it's questioned. And when the truth finally speaks, it doesn't need to raise its voice at all.